All right, we're going to continue on with some prerequisite knowledge for Algebra 2. So far, what we have done is worked on something called evaluating. And evaluating is basically when you are crunching numbers, adding integers, adding fractions, using the order of operations. That's all evaluations. And now what we're going to get into is a different set of instructions called simplifying. And really, the note to understand how to simplify something, it only takes into account two major elements. And the major elements for simplifying are using the distributive property and combining like terms. So when we see an expression and the directions are to simplify it, we want to look at the distributive property and combining like terms. And combining like terms is very similar to when the lesson on adding and subtracting fractions. You can add things that are like. You cannot add things that are not like. And when it comes to multiplication, you can multiply whatever you want. So again, when it comes to simplification, we want to distribute and use combining like terms. So take, for example, this first expression. We have a crazy looking algebraic expression, and what we want to do is make it simpler than the way it looks now. So as you can see, we're not going to use the distributive property. There is no distribution here. So we don't have to worry about the distributive property on this particular expression because we don't have anything multiplying through parentheses. What we do have to do is look for terms that are like. From the previous example, we were talking about cows and we were talking about apples. It's very similar to what we're doing here. Okay, so we can only add and subtract cows, and we can only add and subtract apples. And so the same thing happens with variables. We can only add and subtract x's, and we can only add and subtract y's. And so one of the ways when we read numbers, take for example this term here. This is a positive 15y. Another way to read this is 15y's. This is showing that there are 15 y's. This is showing there are negative 42 y's. Okay, so it's another way to read it, and it can help you with understanding how we add and subtract. So in this example, we don't have any distribution, but what we can do is look for terms that are like. And as I said before, you can add x's to x's, and the x's I'll underline in red, and we can add y's to y's, and the y's I'll underline in blue. And what we can do from that identification piece is rewrite this expression using the commutative property. We can rewrite this expression putting the x's with the x's. Now this x here has a minus sign in front of it. So when we rewrite the expression, we have to rewrite it with the minus sign. So we have our x's with our x's. We have our y's with the y's. This is a 15y. It comes with the sign in front of it, plus 15y. And this again is a minus 42y. It comes with the sign in front of it, minus 42y. So we have our x's with our x's, our y's with our y's, and we can then combine from there. Now when it comes to combining terms, again, how we can read this. We have negative 23x's minus how many x's here? Okay, so we have negative 23x's minus an x, minus only one x. So the way we can look at this is we're looking at negative 23 minus 1. That's how many x's we're going to have. Okay, so we're looking at negative 23 minus 1. That's how many x's we're going to have. And then negative 23 minus 1, and you can use your calculator, it's fine by me, is negative 24. So we're going to have negative 24 x's from combining those. In the same way we look at the y's. We have 15 y's minus 42 y's, and so we have 15 minus 42, and that's how many y's we would have. And then we can use our calculator, so we have 15 minus 42. That will leave us with negative 27, yeah? So we have negative 27, and that's how many y's we have. So what do we do here? What do we write here if this is negative 27y? If it's negative 27y, we can just throw it right together. And so we would have negative 27y. If it was a positive 27y, if it was positive, this sign would then be a plus. But since it's negative, we can smush it right together. And so we have simplified this expression to get down to here. The question is, are we done? Is there anything more that we can do? So we have negative 24x's minus 27y's. Just like we couldn't combine apples and cows, we can't combine x's and y's. So we are done. This is the most simplified version of the original expression that we had. So we had this expression, boils down to this. That's all we can do. So what about in the second expression? Now we have some crazy stuff happening here, and we want to simplify that as well. And again, to simplify, there's mainly two sets of directions. We have the distributive property, and we have combining like terms. Now the distributive property works kind of funny according to the order of operations. Remember, with the order of operations, you have to multiply before you add. And so before we start worrying about adding x's and x's and y's with y's, we have to take care of any type of multiplication that is occurring. And as we can see here, if we were to read this expression out loud, we would be saying 3 times this parentheses. So that's multiplication happening there. And same thing here. We'd be saying minus 4 times that parentheses. And so we have multiplication occurring. And again, just like from the order of operations, we have to multiply before we add. And this is the distributive property. We can multiply through that group. We can multiply this 3 times the 2x. And we can multiply this 3 times the plus 5y. And when we multiply 3 times 2x, of course we get 6x, and 3 times plus 5y is positive still, plus 15y. And now we look at this multiplication piece happening here. Now keep in mind, this is a minus 4. So when we're distributing, we are distributing a minus 4. So we're looking at minus 4 times 3x. And when we are distributing, again, we're distributing a minus 4. And so we're looking at minus 4 times a minus y. And so we have to be careful, knowing that this minus sign belongs to this 4, and that's what's being distributed. So you have minus 4 times 3x. That's negative 12x. And since it's negative 12x, we can just throw it right up next to the number next to it. If it was a positive 12x, this would be a plus, but this is a negative 12x, so it's minus. And then we have minus 4 times minus y. And a negative times a negative is a positive. So this would give us positive 4y. And just like I talked about before with the signs, what would I write here? Positive 4y. So we have to be careful with the distributive property first. From here, we are combining like terms. Just like in the previous example, we have 6x minus 12x. And then in this for the y's, we have plus 15y plus 4y. So we can rewrite them and combine our terms. So 6x minus 12x is like 6 minus 12 x's. 15y and 4y is like 15 plus 4, that many y's. And that will give us negative 6x's and 19 y's. And then we have that for leftovers. Considering, is there anything else we can do? We cannot add apples and cows, so we cannot add x's and y's. That's all we can do. And this is as simple as we can get from that original expression. And that's how we simplify expressions.